even more interesting. I began researching this subject, and I found some things that other medical historians and doctors had really never written about. Maybe they just didn't want to write about it. But in any case, I was a bit of an outsider, and I'm a lawyer by training, and I've written other books and articles and for newspapers. And I just plunged into the subject, and I found some very interesting things.
Well, it's definitely interesting. I want to know how difficult the research was.
The research, I spent about a year and a half doing research. Some of it I got over the internet. A lot of it, I was fortunate. I live in New York City, and there's a large medical library here, the Academy of Medicine, that gave me access to ancient texts going back to the Middle Ages. So between the Academy of Medicine and some very focused research on the internet, that's how I was able to research the book, and I think I found some very original things that I believe have never been written about before.
Now, this was from a time where medical procedures were doing, it seemed, way more harm than good. So is it a fair assumption to say that doctors were trying anything to see if it would work?
That's a great summary of the book. The main idea behind the book is that for 2,000 years, medicine went absolutely nowhere. And yes, it actually did more harm than good. Everything else got better and moved forward. Think of science or art or architecture, even warfare. But medicine just stood still, or maybe even got worse. Going back from the time of the ancient Greeks until not so long ago, the time of, say, Washington and Lincoln. And that was really what propelled me to write the book. I found that concept so fascinating, and no one had ever written about it before. So I thought it was just about time.
So if you were sick back then, more than likely you would end up being somebody's guinea pig.
That's absolutely right. Believe it or not, if you were an ancient Greek back in the time of Hippocrates, you might have gotten better treatment than, say, someone in the 1850s. Maybe your great-grandmother. That's how bad medicine was. It just went absolutely nowhere. And again, it might have been doing more harm than good.
Yes, and I do want to talk about that later on. But can we first start talking about the practices, the medical practices of ancient Egyptians?
Oh, sure. You might not be surprised to hear that their practices were very, very primitive. They relied more on superstition and religion than actual medicine. They did have their specialists, I believe the shepherd of the anus and the physician of the belly and other physicians like that. And they had some strange beliefs. They were more concerned with the afterlife than the suffering that they were going through while they were alive, and their medicine reflected that. They did have some good procedures that actually worked. For example, if you had a cataract, they would pour molten glass into your eye, and that would actually work. But a lot of their procedures really weren't that helpful, and again, maybe did more harm than good. Sometimes if someone was sick, if someone had a headache, they'd rub goose fat into their eyes with a helping of jackass liver. If you had a toothache, they might stuff a dead mouse down your throat. They had a cure for baldness. They would, I think that would be the fat of a lion. They would rub on your head. If you were suffering from gout, they would tell you to stand on an electric electric eel, so you would get shocked. That was sort of a typical menu of Egyptian medicine. Again, it didn't really do much good. And by the way, the ancient Greeks also did that thing with the electric eels as well.
Now, there was another doctor in your book, and it was Dr. Walter Freeman, who was the world's foremost practitioner of lobotomies at the time. And with that title, you would think that he was good at his job, but that's not always the case. So can you tell us some things that he was doing?
Oh, yes. Dr. Walter Freeman, and now we're skipping ahead to about the 1950s. Dr. Walter Freeman was a very respected neurologist. He graduated from an Ivy League college, had a thriving practice. His father or grandfather was a doctor. He had a tradition of medicine in his family. Very intelligent guy. He decided he wanted to focus on treating mental illness. And back in the 1950s and the 40s, there weren't a lot of cures for mental illness. Medication was just starting to be used, but he wanted something more direct. And he was a very strong-willed person, very confident, and he decided the best way to ameliorate, make depression go away in his patients was to perhaps stick ice picks through the eyes of his patients. That was the course of treatment that he decided on, and he perfected it. He began practicing in the basement of his home. First, he started doing it on oranges. He would drive an ice pick into the orange just to get the technique down, and when he felt sufficiently confident, then he started practicing on his patients. He began with an ice pick, a commercial ice pick from the U-Line Ice Company, and then he graduated. He developed his own special tools, and what's most shocking beyond the procedure itself was that it gained immense popularity. Dr. Freeman became one of the leading mental illness doctors in the world. He began displaying his newfound cure for mental illness and for depression all over the world. He was celebrated. He was feted. He was honored by medical societies. Medicine thought that he had found a miracle cure for depression. Dr. Freeman, he loved doing the procedure. He was a bit of a show-off. He loved being photographed doing the procedure, so there's lots of photographs of him driving an ice pick or a similar tool through the eyeballs of his patients. What he would do is, with a hammer, he would drive the ice pick in through the eyeballs. He would break the bone, the eye socket bone, by really hammering hard with a hammer or mallet sometimes. He would break through the bone and he would go right into the brain. When he got to the brain, he would scrape his tool, his instrument, around, making sure to destroy as much brain tissue as possible.
If you want to avoid your furnace breaking down this winter, the best thing you can do is stay on top of your furnace's annual maintenance. If you do find yourself with a furnace blowing cold air, Any Hour Services technicians service all brands, and they can usually get to you pretty quick. Call Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. Whether you need maintenance, repair, or a second opinion about replacing it, technicians at Any Hour Services can help you keep your home comfortable all winter long. Call Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Want someone on your side after a car accident? Call us. Here's a fact. Insurance companies exist to make money, not pay it out. At Siegfried & Jensen, we care about you and your case. Get the facts DJ. I was injured in a car accident. I called Siegfried and Jensen because the insurance company was trying to take advantage of me. Siegfried and Jensen were great at making sure that I was taken care of.
Here for you whenever and wherever you need us. Siegfried and Jensen.
Want to avoid your furnace breaking down this winter? The best thing you can do is stay on top of your furnace's annual maintenance. If you do find yourself with a furnace blowing cold air, Any Hour Services technicians service all brands, and they can usually get to you pretty quick. Call Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. Whether you need maintenance, repair, or a second opinion about replacing it, the technicians at Any Hour Services can help you keep your home comfortable all winter long. Call Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Want someone on your side after a car accident? Call us. Here's a fact. Insurance companies exist to make money, not pay it out. At Siegfried and Jensen, we care about you and your case. Get the facts and the help you need. Call us today. My name is DJ. I was injured in a car accident. I called Siegfried and Jensen because the insurance company was trying to take advantage of me. Siegfried and Jensen were great at making sure that I was taken care of.
Here for you whenever and wherever you need us. Siegfried and Jensen.
And that was his procedure. The patients, and some of them died right on the table, but the ones that recovered, they would recover from the procedure and they would be very calm. They would be not as agitated as they had been before the procedure, and that was considered a great victory. And oftentimes a relief to the families of these patients, because these patients oftentimes they weren't just depressed, but they were agitated or psychotic, and they were very troublesome. They were hard to care for. But after this procedure, they'd be very restrained, very quiet. They'd be like sheep, and people really appreciated that, and they just assumed that these people, because they weren't acting out quite as much, they were happy as well. It was said that the depression had lifted. The problem was that what he had really done was, in addition to scraping out the brain tissue, he had scraped out the people's feelings and emotions. He took away what really made them human. So he made them into sort of robots. And at a certain point, this was realized, and the procedure gradually disappeared. But for years, this procedure was maybe the leading procedure in neurology for depression and other types of mental illness. In the book, I don't make him out to be a villain, and he really wasn't a villain. He was a little arrogant and a bit of a show-off, but he really had the best interests of his patients at heart, and he was very dedicated to his craft. In fact, I recount in the chapter about him, I recount that he used to take vacations with his family in his station wagon. They loved nature and they loved going to the national parks. And before they'd leave, Dr. Freeman would plan out an itinerary that took him past various mental hospitals near the national parks. And he would call them in advance and say, I'm going to be in the area. Do you have any patients that might benefit from my services? And they would treat him like a celebrity, like a visiting hero. So he would pack up all his tools, the ice pick type instruments, the mallet, that sort of thing, in his station wagon, and he would drive to the hospitals, and maybe they'd have 10 patients lined up to be treated by him. He'd put one on the table, whack away. It might take 5-10 minutes. Then he'd do another. Usually he'd have a press conference, there'd be photos, there'd be celebrations that they were having this heroic, well-known doctor, and he would finish his business and then go on his way to camping at the national parks. That was one of the strangest episodes in medical history, and one of the most devastating as well.
My eyeballs are hurting right now. Now, were these patients going in there to have this done voluntarily, or was it against their will most of the time?
Some of them did it voluntarily, but most of them really didn't have the capacity to do it voluntarily. Mostly it was family pressure. And, you know, the families weren't evil. They were well-meaning families. But it was a very difficult situation. You know, a typical family might be taking care of, let's say, a 35-year-old mentally ill person who can't work, and he's sitting in his room and he's agitated and acting strangely, and they love him or her, and they're desperate for a cure. And then they see this established, famous neurologist coming to town, and they're so desperate to alleviate their own suffering, and especially that of their loved one, that they would volunteer this person for it, or they would sort of pressure them into having it. You know, it was a very confusing situation. But in my chapter about Dr. Freeman, I'm at pains not to really blame him for anything other than arrogance, and the families as well, because they did love these patients and they didn't mean to hurt them. They meant to help.
All right, my goodness, that is hard to wrap your mind around. All right, so I have a thing about dentists. I don't like going to dentists, let alone thinking about going to a medieval dentist. And you did write about that in the book. So can you share some of the things that dentists back in those days were doing as far as their procedures are concerned?
Yes. It's hard for me to even think about, but I'll try. Back in the Middle Ages, dentists they were often called tooth pullers, and many of them were traveling tooth pullers, and they'd wear pointy hats, and they'd wear necklaces of people's teeth that they had pulled out, and they were almost half dentists and half entertainers, believe it or not. They would walk around with a contingent of jugglers and acrobats, and they would go from one town to another, and they'd often be chased out of one town and have to run to the next one. And part of the reason